And welcome to another episode of the Turn Up for What podcast, talking your Houston Texans straight from the Great British Isles. It's almost spring in many ways, and I don't know if a new era of Texans football has sprung. Probably the biggest news in its history, or the biggest move in its history, came to light Friday afternoon. But to try and make sense of it all, with me this week is a returning guest, Mr. Matt Weston from Battle Red Blog. How you doing?
I'm doing great. I'm doing great. I'm very honored to be on the Deshaun Watson traded episode of the show after the couple of years we've talked to each other.
Well, that's it. I thought we were going to be getting some tape heavy conversation about some of the luminaries that we've picked up, AG Cannon, MJ Stewart, and the likes. But we've actually got probably the biggest, the biggest news probably story that you'll probably ever have with his team. Everybody always remembers the moments where they were and what they were doing when they heard the news. Where were you, Matt? What were you doing when the news filtered down to you?
Yeah, I wrote about this whenever we had the official Battle Red blog Watson was trade article because whenever he was drafted in 2017, I was driving out to the desert, out to Big Bend National Park to go backpacking, and the way the weekend kind of broke, it was more. I guess it was better for me to go out to the desert than sit and watch the draft all weekend. And my phone kind of blew up like they trade up. We got Watson, everybody being excited, and it was very beautiful. Like the sun was setting, and it was nice and lots of oranges and pinks and purples and greens, and
The
everything felt very good at that moment in 2017. And this time, I was just trying to finish up work for the day, working from home, staring out my window, and it was a lot more. I wouldn't say it was despairing at all, but it wasn't nearly as beautiful as the day he was drafted, just from what I was currently doing and kind of sifting through at the time for a kind of Friday afternoon news dump like it happened. 2017 was much prettier with the draft announcement than where I was whenever he was actually traded.
Yeah, yeah. I was literally walking into a concert on Friday, uh, and when I saw the compensation, I wasn't best pleased if I was honest. I didn't think it seemed well. The first reaction I had is it seemed a bit on the light side in terms of the extra stuff back because I think people had sort of messaged back to me on the various mediums that they do without really considering what you've said. They just kind of tell you tell you their opinion. But a lot of them said, well, you can't worry about the other stuff. But I think that's where for me, that's where Caserio's job came in at that point because the three firsts were okay. That was kind of the bar that was set. There was a premium over every other quarterback, and failing to get the other stuff, failing to even get a player back, just felt like we were really shortchanged. And I got a text, and the reason why I could have taken the Twitter app off my phone because I didn't want to read it. I didn't want to spent enough time on free agency, wasting hours, looking at all the news updates, as many of us are probably guilty doing. And I got a text just saying, I just said, sold a unicorn for beans. And I thought that kind of summed it up quite well.
Yeah, and it's so I think the one thing about it is one of the things I've learned, about this whole Texans writing and following the team sort of portion of it is that most of, I guess, like most of the way it works, it kind of operates is that fans want to hear good things about their team because they like hearing good things and they have a lot of personal worth attached to the team itself.
Yep.
The team is good, they feel good about themselves because their favorite team is good, even though they have nothing at all. Like they have no actual influence on the team itself. And so, but people on the internet, like on Twitter or whatever else, they want to say things that other people will read and get interactions with. And the best way to do this is to say good, nice things because it makes people feel good and nice to hear good and nice things about their team. And so
Yep.
it's all like based around sentimentality. But with sentiment, there's like mulling down the truth. You can never be fully truthful if you're having a lot of sentiment with what you're saying to be able to make people feel good and happy. And so I think with the Watson trade, a lot of the stuff I kind of saw about it was like the Texans had to move him, which is fine, I guess. They got 3 first round picks, which is fine, I guess. But I don't think Casario got nearly enough for Watson. I think he was hamstrung for sure by the no trade clause. But I think he could have done a little bit more to play hardball to kind of squeeze a few more picks and players out of Cleveland to make this trade happen. And also, the Browns gave $230 million to Watson after this trade happened. So it's like for a team to commit that much to one player like
Mm.
that, you would think they would give it more players if you really wanted to push it. And so, like a lot of this stuff that I've kind of seen from people is they're just happy for it to be done. They think, Casario was hamstrung by the situation, which I think he was to a certain extent. But it's a lot of like good and nice things to cover up the fact that Houston just gave up a top 5 quarterback for 3 first round picks, and that's it, without getting any young talent, without getting any players back, without getting like a second round pick, without getting much other assets aside from the 13th overall pick and then probably some late 20th overall picks. And by the time it's all said and done, Houston's going to get less for Watson than Miami got for Laremy Tunsil if you include the third overall pick. Once you
Yeah,
do all the point numbers
yeah,
compensation for it, but that's what happened here. But in the meantime, we want to feel better about the fact that Houston does have a franchise quarterback. It's finally over and done with, and they got probably the bare minimum that you could get with the 3 first round picks for them for a player of that caliber, and it doesn't feel close to enough at all. And I think that they could have done a better job getting more out of him for him.
yeah. And it's like the sentiment of all we wanted it done. There was no hard deadline whatsoever, and actually, as teams get more desperate, you know, did Casario do enough to let that market fight out between itself? Because I read some of the Albert Breer kind of soundings on it this morning, and he kind of talked, about all the positives that the camp saw and the different propositions that each team was presenting. But you think over time, when they pushed the Matt Ryan signing bonus back a couple of days, it looked like he was going to go there. He had 2 meetings with New Orleans, didn't happen there. So to go to, I mean, the cynic and everybody would probably say you went to the Browns because they offered you the most money. They offered you a historical guarantee. So actually, it wasn't about going to win somewhere. It was the team that you'd already told that you didn't want to sign for because they offered you the biggest check. You then, you done a 180 and went to go and play for them. So I mean, I don't know. It's a strange one, I think, because it feels like the most powerful agent in all this, or the most powerful, individual in all this was the agent, and it felt like they just kind of, played time out as it went along, waited to the point where they got enough teams interested that they could kind of get Houston to sign off on it. But at the same time, once again, it feels kind of rushed, a little bit unnecessary, and that whole thing. Oh well, we just wanted it done, but you don't get another chance at this. It's that's it done now. And it feels like it was just short of what could have been. And I think that sentiment's the one that probably frustrates me the most, Matt, is because I've felt that far too many times in the last 3 or 4 years that things just weren't handled in the correct way, in a professional manner that got the best outcome for the team. So, it feels like a bit more deja vu yet again, I think.
Yeah, of course, and like even like his decision to go to Cleveland, I think it's going to be hilarious watching him play there because he's going to be playing with the set of circumstances that we always kind of want that Houston tried to build for him. They wanted to have a great run game for Watson. That never happened. They wanted to have an elite offensive line for Watson. They never even had an average offensive line with
Mm.
all the moves that they made. Cleveland has a top 5 run game. They have a top 5 offensive line. He's going to play behind those two set of circumstances. I'm sure they'll add Will Fuller there, another good wide receiver
Yeah.
too. Their pass catchers are pretty good. The other thing too is he's going to play in a play action heavy offense as well.
Yeah.
Something that we always kind of talk about is that Watson would be great with more play action. He'd be great taking shots downfield. They're going to do that in Cleveland with the way Stefanowski's offense works. And then also like Cleveland too, they've been hamstrung by Baker Mayfield being very mediocre. And even playing in a very easy offense, he's been very mediocre with a lot of problems in the pocket and everything else. And so we're going to see Watson play in a set of circumstances that Houston tried to build around him that they couldn't build, that we always want to see Watson play in for a team that didn't give up any players at all. And they get to keep their second, round pick and everything else afterwards. So like Cleveland's going to be a top 5 team next year, probably in the AFC. They should win the AFC North. Watson's going to be really good for it. And he may be suspended for like 4 to 6 games. And like Brissett may start in the meantime. And so it's a situation where like Cleveland came out as good as they could with it. And Watson's going to be really good there. And he's been playing in some circumstances that he never had in Houston after all the resources they sunk to try to be able to put him in an environment like that.
Yeah. I think it's funny because, yeah, on paper that team's kind of ready made to win, but was it the 10-7 game, the weather delay game a couple of years ago, or his last season he played? when Crennel was mopping up after O'Brien was fired. And I always remember there was a pass that he tried to, and Will Fuller was wide open, and the wind just caught it, and it just and it just didn't reach there. So I don't think he's going to have the league leading numbers that he had in 2020 before he disappeared off the scene, I suppose. And I suppose it's kind of one of these things where you think, and just going back to that point earlier you mentioned about, as you said, people just want to hear nice, good, positive things all the time. But yeah, I think the reality is people maybe need to waken up to the fact that just because Bill O'Brien was a shit show doesn't mean that Nick Caserio, by definition, is taking over. Just because he's a qualified professional doesn't mean he's good at these things. I think there's a case to be made now that he's objectively bad at trades, and this is just the latest one. It might not be as bad as shipping off Hopkins and only getting a second round pick, but as you said, when you consider all the variables there, the Tunsil trade expenditure in terms of the points, Jimmy Johnson's old chart, if it's still applicable these days, is that it's less value back. The equity given was not there, and I think that the question that I kind of go back to in my head, Matt, is even if you get all these extra three first round picks, and if every single one of those guys is a complete baller, defensive line, offensive line, whatever, might not still be enough to try and compensate for what you've just given away. So, I think it's just feels like a very, very kind of short-sighted move again, I think. And I 3 first-round picks sounds great because nobody's really done it before. But there's so many different things that could go wrong about those player selections and what have you, that might not necessarily pay dividends for you on a Sunday. So I struggle to feel good about it. I couldn't on Friday.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. I completely agree. And so like even look at what Seattle got for Wilson. Whenever that trade first happened, there's a lot of talk that Seattle didn't get enough and all back. They got 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and they got Fant, who I think has been a really good tight end, who just hasn't had like the statistically great breakout season. They got Locke, who's awful, and then they got defensive lineman as well too, and Shelby Harris, who's been good at defending past the line of scrimmage, who we've always kind of expected to have like a bigger contract, but I guess just because of his age, it never really occurred. So they got, 2 good players, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks for a mid-30s Wilson who has HGH below at the moment and a worse contract than Deshaun Watson's about to have. And so Houston wasn't even able to get as good of a return that, Wilson got for a deal that day was kind of mocked as not being a good enough contract too. And so like going back to Caserio, this idea of him being hamstrung and him not getting enough for Watson, the one thing that hamstrung him was that Watson had to agree for a place to be traded and then deal would be made afterwards. But it's like, you don't have to trade him. I know they're trying to get resolution to this and get out of it, but it's like, you don't have to trade him to Cleveland. You don't have to trade him at all. And so you can push Cleveland saying like, I understand he wants to play there and he'll play there, but I have to have more than just 3 first-round picks. I need this and I need, a few other things. And one of the things that's always happens in any sort of trade, it's always like those are always the most important parts, but it's just always strange to how like a 5th-round pick or a 4th-round pick or getting, like a backup player that you may not expect to be good at all, how much of a dividend that could play down the line. That isn't really expected to be like an important part of the deal, but every asset's important. Every asset's, extremely valuable because there's a limited number of resources available to build a team through. And so just the fact of Houston made this trade to get resolution so they can move forward. And instead of trying to push this as far as they could to get the most for Watson as possible. And so everybody's happy because it's gone and over and done with, but they did not get enough for Watson. And I don't think Caserio did a good enough job, stressing and pushing to get the utmost, they possibly could for Watson after this trade was, completed, taken care of.
Well, yeah, and I think like what was stopping him wait till the draft, or where you could have opened up to 4 years worth of picks, and that may even been just a second round pick, in 4 year, in the third year after this draft, you'd get a slate of 4 different draft sets of picks. But I didn't see what the rush was at this stage because it's only since last Friday he's been given the all clear on the legal front sort of thing. The market then generated itself really, really quickly. And I don't know why they just didn't take a step back and say, look, ultimately, if, as you said, if Cleveland are willing to pay you $230 million, wholly guaranteed, I don't know if that's complete guarantees. I'm not saying detail of that yet, but what was the rush? And I failed to see what it was, because ultimately, did he want the picks for this year? Because he's only got one this year, and it's the 13th overall pick. So in this draft class, I don't think it's particularly all that great, if I'm honest. It's probably up there with the sort of levels of the 2019 draft class. So, why did he have to pull the trigger? And it makes you think, was there pressure from elsewhere? I know Lovie Smith had some really direct comments about it. Obviously, we've heard nothing from Cal McNair beyond a bland statement that came out, as expected. But I don't know what the rush was, and I think obviously all the Watson legalities off the field really kind of clouded the story. But I often keep going back to the point I talked about this a little bit last week, Matt, was, do you think the Texans will have any reflections on it, or will they do the same kind of cover up as they did with O'Brien? Or they just blamed him for everything? But actually, there was a lot more, actors at play in the organisation, particularly in the front office, that didn't do a good enough job, and put us in that sort of mess. And do you think they'll just kind of wash it off as the guy who got himself involved in things he shouldn't have done off the field, and therefore we traded him? But actually, the crux of the reason was not being a functional organisation that could operate in a way that a star quarterback that you'd search your entire history for to be successful, they didn't believe you were capable of that, because that's the real crux of the problem. And I wonder, will there be any reflection of that? Because it's easy to wash it under, let it wash under the bridge sort of thing for fans who, we got rid of the guy who, had 22 cases against him. But ultimately, when it's a footballing context only, there was a lot of, organisational failings that led us to this point. Obviously that was kind of going in the background. But do you think there'll be any kind of adjustments or recognition of things that went wrong, or is it just going to get washed in their true style?
Yeah, I think with Casaria, the one thing he did say, it's like, unless he hits on these picks, it doesn't really matter what happened, And I think he admitted, if he doesn't hit the picks, there's gonna be somebody else in his chair. And like that's kind of what it comes down to for his whole career as a general manager. It comes down to what he gets for Watson, which he didn't get enough for, and then the second part is what does he do with the picks afterwards. And so it's be interesting to see if he holds on to him, if he tries to trade back and that part of it. But
Mm,
like I think Casaria does understand what he needs to do or not do at his role. I think he reflects pretty well. But I think also Casaria is one of those guys that overanalyzes everything, and so it becomes such a jumbled, incomprehensible mess whenever he just gives his press conference statements where a simple question becomes a minute half long tirade where you don't really know what the answer is to it because it's been looked at to such fine detail, when like the position's pretty easy whenever like you like get down to the basic part of it. The position is
mm,
get good football players. That's it. That's the whole job of the general manager. It's to
mm,
get good football players, and he just has not done that very well the last 2 years. It's always talking about the culture or the guy's personality or his toughness or how long he's at practice or what time he shows up. When really at the end of the day, what matters is just the talent and the guy's ability to produce. I think he's gone so far in the other direction of trying to find a specific sort of player that he's looking for football players that don't even exist out there at all whatsoever. With these like high character, high talent, high intelligence guys where everybody has something that isn't perfect with them. So I don't know. I think he does reflect well, but I think he over reflects to such an extent that we don't really know. Like he goes so far into it that he
mm.
kind of misses what the whole point of his job is at times.
Well, yeah, because I think, like you said, like if you look at the trades not being good enough, two hires of coaches not being good enough, management, the salary cap, we've only just been taken over by Atlanta today in terms of dead cap money, because Matt Ryan, somehow they've only given up their second or third round pick to go to Indianapolis, and they've taken on the biggest ever cap hit in the history of the league. I think 43 million, around that kind of ballpark. So, when you add up every facet, as you said, getting good, the only lane he's got left is to pick really good players high in this draft, because everything else has kind of been subpar. And as you said, nobody wants to admit that, because they want to have a redemption story after Bill O'Brien, all this kind of stuff. But I don't think he's done anything. I think we're now at the point, today or as of Friday, that you can't look back on the past. You can't blame any of these other factors anymore. I think we're now past that. The line of demarcation was trading Watson. We've done that, so therefore there's no time for excuses anymore. And as you said, I have a real kind of concern. Does he know what kind of player he wants? So if he was going to pick at that third overall pick, do you think he's got an idea of who, hands down, he wants?
Right now, I don't really know. I think a lot of the tackle stuff, even if they traded Tunsil, I think drafting a tackle at 3 overall would have been really stupid. Because you just put Howard at left tackle, and you can always find like somebody who's competent enough at right tackle. Even if you want to give Heck another shot there, it's not that big of a deal for a rebuilding team. But like, I mean, I don't know. I don't know what he likes or what he's going to value with that high of a pick. And a lot of it seems to be part of their interview process and getting a Texan, whatever it is that that means to them in their eyes too. But I really don't have a good feel of what they're going to do at 3. I think more than likely they would probably trade down just based off of the New
Mm.
England approach. But he's done the opposite the last 2 years with how he's trade picks for players or trade up in the draft too. So I don't know. I don't really have a good feel for what he's going to do at 3 overall right now.
Yeah, I just don't think. Yeah, I just think it's that philosophy thing. I don't know where he sees. This team's got 101 needs, and I don't know. I just don't know where he sees the exact type of player. Does he look at Kyle Hamilton? Does he look at Trayvon Walker and say, if we get that guy in our team, we'll be a better defensive or offensive side of the ball for it. And I don't know if he's, as you said, I think it's when people are, or he certainly tries to position himself anyway as being, hyper focused, analytical, structured. He uses all these phrases all the time, but actually, what the output of that to the rest of us, when we're on, the onlookers, is it comes across as a bit disjointed. And I think this trading process of Watson was very similar. Just as the Lovie Smith hire looked very disjointed from the outside, and I'm just unclear of what value he's bringing, and I know people don't want to hear that because they're, it's like any abusive or trauma you go through. As soon as you move on to something new, it feels good just because it's new. But it actually, when you look at the objectively, if you look at all the areas of his job, unless he absolutely nails these first 2 picks, and these guys are, on the pathway to being quality top end starters, this picture of this club, I think, Matt, in a year's time could look quite tricky, and it's on a bit of a knife edge in terms of where things can go, I think, right now. And you're going to have to see results very, very quickly. But the Tunsil thing you mentioned there, I've got no clue for the life of me why he restructured his contract again and gave him all his money up front again this season. You did that last year. The guy quit on you because he had a minor hand injury. And now you've chosen to do that again this off season for a guy who threw the towel in. And I'm just kind of, I struggle to see a strategy, I think, is my overall point.
Yeah, that makes sense. And well, like the Tunsil thing, I think is a great example. Howard's was like 90% Tunsil as a pass protector, was just as good as a run blocker, plays best football at left tackle, is on his rookie contract still too. Could have swept in there, played very well at left tackle, and they could trade Tunsil for a late first or even like a 2023 first round pick, early second round pick, and that would have been more valuable than having a guy who doesn't play football hard enough, who doesn't even really want to play football. It seems
Yeah.
like at times too. Have you ever seen his protect the tree sort of
No, I
Twitter
can't
thing or
watch it. I
whatever?
can't watch it. Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's something I don't know. It just
Uh,
seems like something that somebody makes in like high school or whatever, with their
yeah.
friends. And it just seems like he doesn't care about playing football itself, but whether like football is like this how he makes his money and then he be this idealized of something. Whenever it's like you're really good at pass protecting, just do that, or you didn't mean enough to actually make some to run block a little bit. But that part of it's kind of frustrating to watch sometimes, regarding Tunsil's performance. And so I don't understand why keeping him around for this upcoming season for those reasons. I'm sure they could have got some sort of compensation, like that, but it's just maddening to watch somebody with the talent that he has for everything Houston's given him, from trade picks to the contract he's had to the constant restructurings. And it hasn't really mattered that much. And like for this season, Houston's going to have 2 good offensive tackles and they're going to score like 22 points a game because they don't score points itself. So I don't really see the added impact that keeping Tunsil on this team really does whatsoever. And it does make sense, but I think Houston has done that though, where for whatever reason, if it's Jack Easterby or Bill O'Brien or Cal McNair or what, they really have like held on to these guys that they added in 2020 and 2019. Tunsil's here. Eric Murray got extended.
Yeah.
David Johnson was the one guy who got kept last year and was very obvious he shouldn't be on the team. And he struggled last year too. And I guess his contract ended, so he may not be here. But they've held on to these guys that they signed for very strange reasons. And it seems like Tunsil's part of that boat for whatever reason it may be.
Yeah, and they extend it, and I'm not seeing the year 2 guarantees I need to look this out. I've kind of maybe buried my head a little bit this week just after Friday. But there was no reason, and I know you put a lot of clips out, and 9 times out of 10, I noticed that you and I put probably similar clips out from the old 22 and stuff, and trying to understand what this team is like on a in a football level, not all the kind of noise that goes around it. And if you watch Eric Murray last season, there was no reason anybody could come up with, apart from that one game in Tennessee in the rain, which he looked okay actually, that could you possibly justify extending him? And I just think it's just another strange move, I think. And when it's and people will say, oh well, you're getting too caught up in the fact that they've signed Jeff Driscoll, the fact that they've given Anthony O'Clair just the best part of $1 million more than Max Williams or whatever it might be. But when you all start piling all these sort of small questionable moves up, the material outcome at the back end of it is quite significant. But yeah, I think sometimes you're you're pissing into the wind trying to tell people this a lot of the time.
Yeah, I mean, Murray last year had 2 good games, and that was more than he had in 2019. But like he got 2 years, $5 million extra. Christian Kirksey's not good.
No,
Malik, the only good contract decision he made was getting Malik Collins for the contract he had, because like Collins is better than Sebastian Joseph Day is, and he got a better contract than he did. Um, I'm glad they kept Kamu Hill because he had a breakout season. He's like everything that exemplifies what they want a Houston Texan to be. And so it didn't really make any sense off him to preach these sort of things and then not keep Cruz Hill
yeah,
after the
yeah,
season he had last year. Desmond King's not good as an outside cornerback, and Tavier Thomas has made him completely irreplaceable or replaceable in this roster. And like Desmond King shouldn't be here to play outside corner, but they re-signed him because I don't know, they have to re-sign somebody to play that position. And then they added Jox Reeves-Maybin, who made some tackles in Detroit, but I've never watched him play. I've never heard of him, so I
yeah,
don't know if he's good or not. But it goes back to just signing linebackers just to sign guys. But they also didn't do things like cut Kevin Pierre-Louis and maybe cut Justin McCray
yeah,
or
yeah,
cut Max Sharping or get rid of some of these guys to create salary cap space for free agents who may actually be good football players who could improve the talent of the team. So I'm just kind of feeling like this year is going to be just like last year. It's
yeah.
going to be a bad team without much to watch for, except now there's going to be 2 first-round picks on it that you can watch every week that will give you some idea of like, is this guy good or not, to add some value or entertainment to watching this team. But it really seems like everything's set up for 2023 being really the first year you should care about the offseason, care about the cap space, care about the decisions this team makes, because this year it's going to be, is Davis Mills a starting quarterback, and is pick number 3 and number 13 overall, are they any good? Because there really isn't much else here at all.
Yeah, and the Kevin Pierre Lewis one is generally is worse in many ways
It
than
makes
most
zero
of them.
sense.
He didn't play last year, or he played a little bit towards the end of the year, I think, from memory. But I've got no memory of his playing style, what he looks like out there. But there was actually soundings from the team and people that actually put it out there that they were disappointed with the signing, and the word regret was used. But now I know they've restructured his deal and kind of move some money around a little bit. But yeah, I just think there's been obviously this Watson move will overshadow everything. So in 3 months' time, people won't be talking about it. But
Yeah, well, and even like Pierre Lewis in Washington,
he wasn't
he
good,
was
yeah.
benched for John Bostic
Yeah,
and Cole Holcomb, and their defense got so much better once Kevin Pierre Lewis wasn't on the field at all. And he's one of those coverage linebackers who can't cover and wasn't good at Washington. Got signed to a big contract. I mean, even like we're not talking about like a huge contract, but a multi-year, multi-million-dollar contract he should have gotten. Could have gotten off it this offseason, create some cap space to get like, I don't know, a pass rusher or a defensive tackle a little bit earlier on in free agency. Get somebody can make some negative plays in the front seven, and that didn't happen at all as well either. So I don't know. I think maybe they're so focused on the Watson stuff, they didn't really want to make any moves until then. And maybe now that's over, they're gonna make some day two, second wave of free agency signings. But so far, it's just been just kind of silly where I don't know what the plan is or what they're trying to accomplish with the re-signings that they've had, and just the lack of just adding young talent to the team through free agency or whatever avenues they have available to them.
yeah. It's just flashed up there. They've just formally confirmed Justin Britt again, who missed a lot of time last year. And I
Wasn't
remember,
good.
well, I know, and I actually remember, I can't remember who it was, but one of the contributors out there, and I put a couple of clips up of just he wasn't good. And the word cooked was used because it gets to a point where so many injuries prevent you from being a proficient enough athlete to contribute at this level. And that was very, very clear, I think, for most people watching him. Serviceable in the run game, pass protection, not good enough.
And
For
also, he
everybody,
just missed a lot of blocks because of his brain too. Like he just had
yeah.
missed assignments, and you don't really expect that from an 8-year veteran, whatever it is that he is at his age, to just like not go to the right gap whenever you're doing half slide protections and that sort of thing. And so I couldn't believe that they re-signed him like they did. I thought for sure they would draft a center, probably early on, or find somebody, like Bozeman, and for a 1-year contract to get some depth there instead of keeping him for like a 2-year. And they gave him a pretty good contract as well too. And it was just very surprising to see that.
Yeah, and I suppose, it's easy to kind of throw in the towel. But when you lay out all the points, I think of all the moves they've made and it was like when the argument when they brought back Lovie Smith, it was continuity. But my question was continuity for what? What were you trying to achieve? Because last year was a heavily penalised team. It was genuinely unwatchable in offense in the early weeks of the year, apart from obviously the 6 quarters of the flash in the pan with Tyrod. And you wanted to continue that, and I don't know if they were watching the same thing as everybody else. And I noticed, and I made a note to ask you about this. You thought they were pumping in crowd noise at the end of the year, but it just goes back to that kind of whole delusion stuff of like, are they watching the same stuff as everybody else? Because people out there have got a very clear opinion of what's going on, and then everybody else is maybe trying to delude themselves at times to where this is actually headed right now. And yeah, I think it seems just like when you stack all those moves up, it kind of makes you question things. And if it doesn't, I'd suggest you maybe want to have a bit more sort of critical thinking, because it's easy just to believe what people pander to you. But I think there's when you strange moves, and the
Yeah,
continuity of last season, I didn't enjoy watching it, and I know a lot of people didn't. So why would you want to repeat that again for everybody's benefit or not?
yeah. The funniest thing about the Lovie Smith hiring too is that everybody was just very happy that he admitted that there weren't a lot of fans in the stadium. They're like, I'm
Yeah,
so happy he admitted to that fact. It's like that's how low the bar is right now.
yeah,
They'd be like, yeah, we don't have a lot
yeah,
of people at the games. By saying that, that's a reason why they're excited for Lovie Smith to be the head coach. And like he's just a better version of David Coley.
yeah, yeah.
He hasn't coached a good football team in 15 years. He got his ass kicked in Illinois. He got his ass kicked in Tampa. He got his ass kicked last year by spot dropping cover two. They switched their defense like more of an NFL defense after 9 weeks into the season, but they weren't a well coached defense at all. They were all over the place, and they were propped up by the turnovers that they forced. And I guarantee you, next year the defense is going to be worse, and they're going to force less turnovers, and people are going to be surprised. It's just because it's a high variance stat that you don't have a lot of control over, and it's why defensive production varies so much year to year. And so, like, I'm not excited to watch Lovie Smith this season. I'm not excited to watch Desmond King and Christian Kirksey back out there. Again, it's like, is Davis Mills a starting quarterback? And what can they get out of their draft picks this year are like the only two things that matter about this upcoming season.
Yeah, because I know when they're when they're churning out signings like Ogo Ongabowari, I've never heard of, at the edge rusher spot. I think when you look at the signings so far, and as you said, maybe the Watson thing did hold everything back to a point, but I think you can make at this stage of the off season. I know you got to go through the draft, right? But rookies take a while to acclimatise. They might not necessarily be ready to contribute from day one. I think right now it's hard to see a picture where this team is going to be materially better year on year, and it's going to be a very, very similar product in some ways. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think so. I think they'll be worse on defense, probably a little bit better on offense next year, just considering the fact that like it's gonna be Mills in year two. I think the pass protection should be a little bit better. They're still not gonna be able to run the football. And like adding back to like our previous conversation they were having, they have Royce Freeman. He averaged like
Yeah, I mean,
2.7
yeah,
yards a carry.
yeah,
That
yeah,
was terrible. And like Burkhead had 2 good games. Like I don't mind Burkhead as far as being a veteran running back, but it's like just sign JD McKissick or just sign a younger guy with some sort of speed. It doesn't matter. Just find somebody. Don't bring back Royce Freeman. There's no reason for that at all. But I think the offense will be a little bit better. The defense is gonna be worse, and they're going to be about the same sort of team that they were last year, where maybe a few games they're going to look competent, but the rest of the time they're going to just get beat up by really good football teams like we saw last year too. And there's enough turnovers they can win 4 or 5 games, whatever it comes out to. But again, I think it's a 2-year rebuild if we don't consider 2019 a rebuild, where like 2023 is the first year where there's actually some pressure on Caserio, pressure on him in free agency, and then also like the picks he's had the last 2 drafts will need to be more than like ideas, where like Nico Collins wasn't very good, but Roy Lopez was the best pick he had in
Yeah.
2021. Mills is still a question mark. I don't think the linebacker they drafted from TCU Wallows can be anything more than a special teams player.
Mm.
But it's like, it was like they at least played last year, and so seeing with the other rookie draft class and everything else, it really doesn't feel like much is going to be changing here until 2023 once the cap opens up some.
Yeah, no, yeah, it's one of those things. I think when you look at the complexion of the team across it seems like a similar outcome is going to be very, and it's tough. I think, and I'm sure you find that on your team of guys. It's not easy not to talk about the same fucking shit over and over again, because there's still problems, and there's still there's been no progress. So to try and even like kid yourself on to put a good complexion on that is difficult. I mean, the Royce Freeman sign. I mean, at what point watching him? I mean, he looked like slow. That was the only way you could describe him at a position where burst is everything. You brought back a guy who was slow. You brought back another running back that was at Jacksonville last year that you had on your roster 2 years ago. And it's just like, so how could you ask people to buy into that? And I think that's what they're trying. They're selling something here that's so questionable with the signings and personnel. And it was like I saw a lot of people saying, well, actually, Caserio's only signing. His best signings of this offseason are going to be on other teams right now, because there was an assumption that they were going to get them in a trade. They got nothing back, so I think right now this roster looks materially worse in some ways than last year.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I forgot. Well, it's like I forgot about the Jackson running back signing. I don't want to say his name wrong, but it's also the AJ Cann signing was absurd too. Cann's never been below average.
No,
Every year Jacksonville wanted to get rid of him, but they were never quite able to. And they bring in Jacksonville's ex-offensive line coach, who never coached a good offensive line in Jacksonville, who had problems developing young talent in Jacksonville, but has a job because he's good friends with Lovie Smith and they coached together, 6 years ago. And it's like that's what the entire coaching staff is built around. Is like, do you know Pep Hamilton? Do you know Lovie Smith? And if so, you're here now, despite whatever your performance was at previous stop too. And so I thought the Cann signing was absurd as well. Ogbo from Los Angeles is just a Jacob Martin replacement, and I will say I am happy to finally be done with watching Jacob Martin, get his ass kicked in the run game on the edge and have one good pass rush a game and miss sacks, and be able to like get stopped on a bull rush, stop on a speed rush over and over again, and he'll have one chop rip that works, and he makes a play on the ball. I can't believe he got the contract he got from New York.
Yeah, I know.
I'm excited not have to watch Jacob Martin, anymore too.
What do you think Justin Reed going to Kansas City? And also another player who went to Kansas City was Gary Christian, who actually, when he's played, he was actually a lot better than a lot of the guys on this team. But there's just two guys that let walk. I mean, Justin Reed, he never lived up to his potential.
Did you see his hat he wore?
Yeah, he looked like...
What was that?
Yeah. It's like, I don't know if he thought it was Halloween or something, but yeah.
What was that? He was like Carmen Sandiego or something.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over the or he reminded me of one of the dogs or one of the weasels in Who Framed Roger Rabbit is what he was.
Yeah.
I couldn't get over the outfit he wore that day though.
Yeah, it was a strange one. I'd probably up there with Carson Wentz's like mustard yellow jacket that he wore to the opening presser. I don't know if there's a Watson presser schedules, is there? For in front
I
of
saw
the Cleveland
that he
fans.
was gonna be there this week, and then he got changed, so he may not be back. He may not be in Cleveland until next week or something. But I assume
Right.
they're gonna have some sort of press conference.
Yeah.
He may have some legal stuff going on to get cleared
Yeah.
up, as that goes along. Do you think he's gonna be suspended at all? And if so, how many games do you think he's gonna be suspended?
Well, I mean the precedent set by the league is incoherent at best. When you look at the history of disciplining players for a variety of reasons. So will he be suspended. He probably should be, if you think about it, on a level playing field. Whether that whole sort of adage of the time served last year because he sat out. But I think from a PR point of view, I think it would be very difficult for them to do that. But I saw a lot of people kind of getting upset about Watson getting all that money and stuff. But look, this is one of the biggest kind of like dirtiest businesses out there. It is a marketing machine that will sweep all these people away in its wake because it's just all about billions of dollars changing hands from fans into owners' pockets. So. I think they might give him a token 6-8 games or something, but as you said, he might come back and that team might still be good enough to get in the playoffs if he only plays 8 games, and then that'll leave us with probably picking in the late 20s. So that pick, the extra pick, isn't all that valuable at that point.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what happened, I guess, is the biggest thing.
Well, that's it.
And this is one of the things that's hard about. It's like the sheer number of accusations is enormous. But the fact that he didn't face any criminal charges after going to the grand jury, after they saw the evidence available, I don't know what happened. I don't know what the truth is. None of us from our point of views knows exactly what happened all whatsoever. And so just based off of, the number and everything else, what typically happens, I would think he may be suspended maybe 4 games. But this idea that he's suspended for all of this year and all of next year and the Browns waste their money, that's not what's going to happen. He'll be suspended for a handful of games of that. And he's gonna be really good in Cleveland, and it's gonna be like, I don't know, it's gonna be very strange, watching him play in this environment that we want to see him play in Houston as well too as part of it. But I don't know. I think if he suspends, it's gonna be like 2 to 4 games, maybe 6 at most, and he'll be back out there playing well.
What's your biggest regret with Watson? If you look back on those 4 years, it was all too short. Obviously. A long period of time waiting to find a guy like that. What do you think everybody will look back on and regret the most?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think, I know personally, I've been doing this for a while, and the show we did after they lost to Indianapolis in 2018 in the postseason, or the 2018 season postseason game at home, where their entire offense was DeAndre Hopkins run down the middle of the field in double coverage, and we're going to throw it 70 yards and hope you can catch it. That was their big idea after having 2 weeks to prepare for the Colts. But just that whole season where they had an all-time great run defense, and because of that, their defense was able to their run defense matched their pass defense because they played teams like Denver with Case Keenum and Washington with Alex Smith, and so their run defense was so great that they were able to win games 13-10 and 16-9 with Watson. And then whenever they play against any team that could throw the ball a little bit, they had a lot of problems stopping it, like we saw at Sam Darnold in that Jets game, like we saw in the Colts games as well too that year. And so I think the biggest growth with the Watson situation was that after watching them fall down 14-0 or 21-0 in that game, walk up to the line of scrimmage every single time, have zero game plan in place to be able to attack the Colts and make it some sort of a game at all whatsoever at home. Not firing Bill O'Brien after that game, I think is the biggest regret. I understand keeping him after the 17 season just because the offense was so good for those 5 weeks, and you think there was something to build upon there. And Watson being a rookie and everything else, and his ACL injury. But after seeing what they did in 18, though, with starting 0-3 like they did, and the way they performed the playoffs, their lack of throwing the ball downfield at all whatsoever, and not, working on that aspect of the game to be ready for in the postseason, I think was just completely absurd. And because they kept O'Brien around after that season, they wasted Watson's rookie contract. They didn't do enough to build around it with free agent additions in those time periods too. They traded all their draft picks, which have mortgaged the future they're in now, for the Tunsil trade to go all in to lose to Kansas City. And I think a lot of this bad stuff that happened would have been prevented if they fired him after that Colts game. And so I think that's the biggest regret by far.
Yeah, because if you look at what the Chargers are doing right now, they've just gone spending on everybody, and it doesn't matter because you can always convert it to signing bonus. You can, there's ways around, financial outlay. There isn't ways around draft picks. They're a relatively precious commodity, and it just all felt like it was never handled all that well. And I think that if you were to ever think of a point in time where or his camp certainly, their view of this organization not doing enough to be successful around them would be, it was completely captured by that playoff game against the Colts. To be that out of it for long periods of time in one of the early rounds of the playoffs against a divisional opponent was just inexcusable. That was one of the few games I remember that I thought, something have to change. I don't think I even got through the fourth quarter. I just went home, and it was tough, and I think that was probably a moment that you thought nobody was looking at it with a critical lens enough to say, actually, this isn't good enough, guys. If we want to take advantage of a generational transcendent talent, I know people throw those phrases around, but I don't think Watson was far off it. I always remember for the best moments, looking back on it, I think the Seattle game in Seattle was, before he got injured, obviously, that following week. But yeah, that was some of the best football we watched, and it felt like at that moment we'd arrived a little bit, and it felt like, we've got a real chance here if we can just get a couple of corners, tight ends. We were short of a few bits and pieces, but they let Dwayne Brown walk out the building a week later, and I think that was probably the highlight for me, or that stretch anyway in his rookie year. But being in Seattle that day, that was, I think that's a sporting experience that'll probably live with me for a long time, because it was just so high octane, fun to watch, long passes downfield, trickery at the line of scrimmage, jet sweeps, so much misdirection. You just didn't know what was going to happen. It was great to watch. But they never got back to that level consistently. They sort of lent into it again in the 2018 season after they lost the first three games. But it just wasn't consistent or good enough, and it was always seemed like there was there was what you knew what he could do well and what the players you could do well, but there always seemed to be that resistance or hesitancy or arrogance, perhaps from the former departed head coach, that never made all that quite tick and be in unison together, I think. And that's probably the biggest thing, because you knew what the formula was, you just refused to do it at times. Therefore, you got suboptimal results. You didn't go far enough in the playoffs. And I suppose the biggest one will always be the Kansas City one, because that was just an implosion, which should have been a reset, drain the swamp type moment. But again, it wasn't. So, and you think if you went back to that moment at the end of 2019 and somebody had stepped in rather than all the crazy stuff that was going to happen, then maybe we could be talking about a different team. I know I've heard you talk about that before, Matt, about a parallel universe out there where this all kind of went to plan.
Yeah, I mean that sums up really well too, where it's like there was a reality out there where they were very good and they were a Super Bowl caliber team, and they did the things that you do around a franchise quarterback on his rookie contract, and they just never did it. And like even like the all season that Brian Gain had before he was fired, entering the 2019 season, that was an off season where they didn't spend their free agency money at all to build around Watson's rookie contract, and that was another issue. And they did the same thing the year before that too, where they just didn't put in the dollars for it. And there's always this idea floating around. It's like, well, it's very smart for them to do that because they're building for the future for Watson. It's like, no, he's really
Future
good
is
right
now.
now.
Yeah.
Yeah, you do this right now. And I always love what the Chargers did last year, where in one off season they rebuilt their entire offensive line, and it cost them like 3 signings and a first round pick, and that was it. And now they have a really good offensive line again. Houston spent, whatever it was, 4 first round picks, 3 second round picks, $90 million, whatever it comes out to, in their offensive line. And it still isn't good. And they invested more into this offseason. It still isn't good. And probably is going to be good this season again, too. And so it's just a lot of that stuff where you've seen so many teams have success by doing it. And it's a very simple formula. And to watch, numerous people come in and fail at it has been, frustrating over the years. And, Houston didn't do enough for Watson when he was here. Watson was at blame for what happened in Houston just by signing the contract that he did, by not speaking up whenever he had the chance to,
Yeah.
by watching, his teammates be traded for nothing, not saying anything at all, and being, the good soldier, whatever, sticking up for Bill O'Brien. So both of them were at fault here. And so it ending the way it does, like, it's still surprising, just because, you saw Cal McNair, renege on his promises that regarding like choosing the GM and the head coach, and then not doing that, which like you shouldn't do it all, but if you promise it, you have to go through with it. And it's kind of led us, to this point all these years later. But it's just been a mess from both sides of the equation, and better ownership, better decision makers. And Watson's a really good player for the Texans for 16 years. And also another idea that I heard was interesting was that a good owner or a good, decision maker group, they would hear about the Watson massage stuff, and they would talk to him and try to squash him, be like, hey, you can't be doing this. This is a problem, or stop doing this. Like they would know about it. So I'm surprised that part of it never happened with Houston too, where he was able to keep doing this and they didn't know or whatever it was. And even then it's like Jack Easterby's job is to make sure things like that don't happen. And it led to the
Yeah,
accusations
yeah,
and everything. So it's all been a mess for the last ever since he was drafted, it's all been a galactic screw up aside from the talent of the player itself. So like I said,
yeah.
he's going to go to Cleveland. He's going to be really good there, and the Browns going to be really good. And it's not going to be surprising at all. And I think Houston's going to feel, stupid whenever they're picking 27th next year.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, isn't it? If you think of you're a billionaire who owns the premier franchise in the well, I'd say the Astros probably are now. I think that's a very close second. Not even a close second now. But if you're a billionaire in that environment and nobody's got or you don't have the awareness or you don't have the connectivity with the local community, that somebody won't even bring that up with you, even if it's just hearsay, you might want to look into this, by the way. I think you might have a problem with your star guy. Let's get ahead of it now and and let's try and save people from getting caught up underneath it just as much as from a football point of view. How that wasn't kind of quashed earlier and was allowed to proliferate into something which should has probably ruined a lot of people's lives. And I think we're talking a sporting context here, but it was it all went on, as you say. We don't know exactly what went on, but the fact that it wasn't picked up at all is probably systematic of other stuff. Absolutely. Do you think, Matt, finishing up, do you think you'll ever come out and give a detailed explanation, or do you think it'll all be kind of hush hush? Do you think Watson will come out and articulate that when he retires, or and we'll see the truth in the fullness of time, or how do you think it'll be remembered beyond the next couple of years?
I mean, I think Watson kind of said what he's going to say in his tweet as soon as like March 13th or whatever about, standing. I think I'm not going to say it right. I can look it up real fast, but it was like standing on the truth and, the Lord will set you free. And it's like he's been adamant this entire time that, he didn't do anything wrong and everything that happened, he's always treated women with respect and that portion of it. So I think that's what he's going to say this entire time. And I think whenever he goes to Cleveland, they do their press conference. He's gonna, say that, or he said, "When you stand the truth, the Lord will free you."
Yeah,
Is what he said after
something
that
like that.
aired.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
so I
yeah.
think he's gonna keep saying that I didn't do anything wrong. None of this accusation stuff was true at all. It was if there's just people trying to get money on me, or whatever he's gonna word it. And then he's gonna be very excited playing Cleveland because they are a good football team.
Mm.
Like people have been forgetting that they are a good team because Baker Mayfield was the quarterback and they had offensive line injuries there last year. And he's going to go to a good football team. They're going to be really good and win games over the next couple of years, 5 years, whatever it is. And I don't know, the whole thing's just going to kind of be, I guess it's going to be very simple next year looking back on it, what happened during this
Yeah.
trade and everything that's occurred since then.
Yeah, I wonder if you'll ever come out and talk about the Texans in detail, of just about how things that went wrong, or things that went on the sidelines and meeting rooms and what have you, and why he felt the ownership wasn't in the right place. When you think of Merciless spoke out, when you think Randall Cobb spoke out, there's obviously Andrew Johnson tweeted out. Hopefully, you'd like to think one day if anybody's going to learn from it, from just a purely football context, then hopefully you think, well, actually, if you could shed some light on it. But as you said, he'll always be discredited because of the mess he got himself in. So I take it you've not dug into the draft too much. I know you often say you do that later in the process, but it's the main thing we've all got to hold on to now, I suppose, for the for the foreseeable.
Yeah. I haven't watched much at all. I wanted to this point, but my own personal life has been, kind of crazy. And it's like, do I want to sit here and do I want to watch Evan Neal and then have them not draft him? Or do I want to sit here and watch grainy video of Kyle Hamilton? And I just haven't worked up the desire, especially after this free agent period too, where I don't know. I'll probably
Yeah.
just watch whoever they end up drafting. We'll see them.
Yeah, I think you're better. I've spent a lot of time and hours I'm not going to get back putting in time watching. Yeah, a suboptimal quality video trying to understand players without doing the all 22 is really difficult. So yeah, you're probably best holding off until we actually draft them, and then you can spend a bit more time focused on it. But yeah, hopefully we'll look forward to the draft. Hopefully we'll pick up some good players, and maybe we can start to see some progress. But if
Yeah,
we've put
they just need like cornerstone players,
yeah.
Like look in the roster there because like I mean the way it works with team building is that you build out a really good position group or you find a really good player and then he masks the weaknesses of the players around him.
Yeah.
So Like if you have a great defensive line, your linebackers don't matter as much. If you have a great secondary, your pass rush doesn't matter as
Yeah,
much because you can't have a great player at every position because of the salary cap. And so the Texans just need to find the best players available, figure out what they're good at, and then build out the rest of the roster from there.
yeah,
And right now they don't have a player you're like, yeah, this guy's been here for a long time. I think aside from Titus Howard, but that's it. And so
yeah,
going off of that, they just need guys that they can actually build a team around, and hopefully they find at least one of them in this upcoming
yeah.
draft.
Yeah, there's no other way you can really sort of press the reset button without getting rid of a franchise quarterback. So yeah, find an identity and find a way you want to play, and we'll find out what that is. But Matt, thank you very much for your time, mate. I appreciate it as always. Always good to have you on and make some sense of this crazy team that we've kind of all got ourselves involved with. It's not easy at times, but appreciate your candor and analysis. It's always much appreciated.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I always enjoy doing this. It's every single like 4 or 5 months I have the chance to come on. I'm always excited for the opportunity to do so. But I think things will be better, probably after this season's over with, and this team may be fun to watch again. But I'm just expecting this year to be kind of a slog like last year, and it's just kind of the way they set themselves up with all the restructures the year before. But hopefully
So
next year, whenever we talk to each other, it'll be a little bit more interesting and riveting
yeah,
than just the team is bad. They're doing dumb things, and it's bad and dumb forever.
yeah. If you can see progress, that's half the battle, I think. But it's not been like that for a long time. But thanks to Matt for his time this week. Thanks everybody for listening. Hopefully you're kind of making some sense of a franchise changing, defining trade. But we'll be back again next week as we start getting ramped up for the draft. But thanks again for listening. I'll speak to you again soon.